Assalamu alaikum. Mar here, inshallah. Today we will cover question paper 11 of May-June 2023. Moving on to the first question. Okay, so it states, what is the produced means of further production? Whenever we are talking about produced means of further production, we mean that something that is created and then it is used to make more goods. Okay, so we have capital exactly, because capital refers to the man-made equipment or the man-made machinery, buildings that are used in further production. Hence, A is the answer. Enterprise basically refers to the organizational aspect or the entrepreneurial skills that are that are used in production. It does not refer to a produced means of production. Hence, B is wrong. C says labor. Basically, labor refers to the human effort used in production, both physical and mental. It's not a produced means of production. While land, that involves all the natural resources used in production. And mind you, natural resources they are not created. They exist naturally, and we just mine them out, or we just extract them. Hence, D is wrong. Moving on to question number 2, a hospital management board decides to reallocate $8 lakh from its $1.2 million new buildings budget to spend on cancer care. What is the opportunity cost of this decision? Okay, so whenever we are talking about opportunity cost, do remember that we are talking about what is being given up, or what is the next best. What is the next best thing? What is the next best thing being given up? Okay, so A and B, they both are talking about the monetary costs. Hence they are wrong. While C is basically talking about where the money is going to be spent on, not what is being given up. Hence that too is wrong. And D is correct, as it is talking about the opportunity cost, or about what you are going to give up when you are going to spend this new $8 lakh on cancer patients. Moving on to the third question. The third question states the diagram shows the change in a country's production possibility curve from XX to YY. So if you notice from the diagram, there's a shift, not a movement. There's a shift in our PPC curve. Okay, so this one is our PPC curve 1, while this one, I will just choose another color. Okay, so this one is our PPC curve 2. Okay, so whenever there is a shift in the production possibility curve, it is usually due to a change in a country or in an economy's production efficiency, which we call productive efficiency. So let's look at our options. The question asks, what would explain this change? Okay, so as I told you before, that whenever there is a shift in our PPC curve, this means that there is a change in our productive efficiency. A states consumers chose to consume more food and less drink. No, this is wrong. As our drink production, basically, this decreased from X to Y, while our food production increased from X to Y. Hence, A is wrong. B states government taxed food production and subsidized drink production. That too is wrong, as we do not have enough information to deduce it. C says productivity rose in food production and fell in drink production. Exactly. As our drink production fell from X to Y, while our food production increased from quantity X to quantity Y. Hence, C is the answer. Moving on to the next question, question number 4. Question number 4 states, a factory manufactures chairs. The manufacturing process is divided into a number of tasks. So whenever we are talking about number of tasks, we mean that this is our production method. Okay, and if you see in the next line, the examiner has clearly explained which type of production method they are talking about. What is the likely disadvantage of this division of labor? Okay, so if you look at division of labor, basically division of labor is when we divide one task. For example, this is a task A. We divide it into smaller tasks, like, okay, and then we assign a separate group of workers for each of these sub tasks in order to complete this main A task. Okay, so A states a decrease in motivation. Exactly, as we as when we divide our tasks, workers often perform repetitive tasks, which can lead to boredom and a decrease in motivation. Hence, option B, C, and D, they are all incorrect, as division of labor typically increases output and it increases our productivity. Hence, when these two increase, our quality of the final product, that too increases as well. So the answer is A. Question number 5. Question number 5 basically states which row correctly describes the relationship between two goods implied by the value of the cross elasticity of demand. Just let me erase this. Okay, so when we are talking about cross elasticity of demand, we should know the three values for our XED. If our cross elasticity of demand is negative, it means that our both products, they both are complements. While if our XED is positive, this suggests that both of the goods, they both are substitutes. I'll just write subs, okay? And if our XED, or cross elasticity of demand, is 0, then this means that both the goods, they are unrelated. Okay, so moving on to the question, it states which row correctly describes the relationship between two goods implied by the value of the gross elasticity of demand. A says minus 2.0, okay, and description weak complements. No, this is wrong, as the negative signs suggest complements, not substitutes. Hence, the magnitude is not weak. Okay, so the first option states minus 2.0, and weak complements. No, it's not weak. The farther you are away from 0, for example, here's 0, okay, on a timeline, and then here's minus 1, then here's minus 2, here's minus 3. So the farther away you are from 0, the more basically you are strong. You are strong complements. Option A is wrong. Option B states minus 0.5. Weak substitutes. No. See, whenever we are talking about negative signs, this means that we are talking about our complements. Both words are complements, not substitutes. Hence, option B, that was wrong. C is correct, as it accurately describes the description. My bad. Positive 0.5 means, first of all, positive means that both goods are substitutes, while 0.5 means that they are weak substitute, as it's close to 0. Okay, so this one is correct. While D is wrong, as it is as the positive sign does not refer to complements; it refers to substitutes, like complements. So D is wrong. Question number 6 states, what does consumer surplus mean? Wait, let me just erase this all. Okay, so basically it is asking about consumer surplus, and often students, they have difficulty in finding out what is the in reducing consumer surplus and in reducing our producer surplus from a graph. So just let me draw one. Here's our demand curve, and here's our supply curve. Okay, I'll just change the curve. Okay, so this one is our price. So this one is our price, while this one is the quantity demanded. Okay, so if we want to find out our consumer surplus or our producer surplus, we will just stick to two rules. Rule number 1 states that the area below the demand curve but above the price and supply line. Okay, this one, it's below the demand curve but above the price line and the supply curve. This is basically our consumer surplus. While the area above the supply line, and below the price line, this is our producer surplus. Okay, so this I will refer to producer surplus. So once this, so when you are able to reduce the consumer surplus and producer surplus from a graph, then it will be quite easy for you to solve questions, especially the ones that come with a complex diagram. So let's check this question. Option A is incorrect, as it is related to producers, not consumers, while option B is also incorrect, as it refers to the opportunity cost. See, the opportunity cost, not about consumer surplus. Option C, that too isn't quite right, as the price the marginal consumer is willing to pay can affect the surplus, but it is not exactly what it measures. While option D is correct, as a consumer surplus measures the benefit consumers receive when they can purchase a product at a market price that is less than what they are willing and what they are able to pay. Hence, the answer is B. Moving on to question number 7. When the price of good X is $2, the quantity supplied is 1 lakh. The price elasticity of supply of good X is 0.8 in the short run, while 1.4 in the long run. The price of good X increases to $2.20. What is the increase in the quantity supplied of good X between its short run and the long run? Now we are talking about between. Okay, so I will just use another whiteboard, as it is lengthy. It is a lengthy answer. Okay, so first of all, we will write down our price elasticity formula. Nice. PES. It is the change in quantity supplied over change in price multiplied by 100. So if we restructure it, then it will be something like this. Percentage change in quantity supplied is equal to our PES multiplied by our okay, so we will first of all write down our our PES formula. PES basically is the quantity is a change in quantity supplied over change in price multiplied by 100. Okay, so the question was, what is the increase in quantity supplied of good X between the short run and the long run? So first of all, we'll have to find our change in price. It's not working. So our change in price we'll find like this. Change in price is basically a new price, which is $2.20 minus old price $2.00 over old price, which is which is 2.20, which is 2.20. Sorry, my bad. Multiply by 100. This gives a change of 10%. So our price increased from 2 to $2.20. Thus it occurred 10% change, 10% increase. Okay. So we have found out our change in price. Now we'll move on to our quantity supplied. Just let me move it. Yeah. So quantity supplied, change in quantity supplied will be found like this. New quantity was 110,000 or 1 lakh divided minus old quantity, which was 0, divided by. Okay, so now we will calculate our price elasticity. Okay, so now we will calculate our quantity supplied or change in our quantity supplied. So change in quantity supplied is basically the formula that we'll apply is our PES in our short run multiply by or change in price. So basically we will just input our value 0.8 was in our short run sorry, multiply by 10, or you can say 10%. Okay, this will give us as an answer of 8%. Hence in our short run our supplied change from 8% multiplied by the initial 1 lakh, which will give us 8,000. Okay, so in our short run there was an increase of 8,000 units of whatever we are supplying. Now we'll calculate for our long term or our long run. We'll apply the same formula, change in quantity, but this time it will be in our long run. So this is supposed to be R. Yeah, is equal to PES of our long run multiply by our change in price. So this will be 1.4 multiplied by 10% increase, which gives us 14%. Okay. Hence, in our long run, our supply. Sorry. So in our long run, our supply basically increased 14%. So 14% of our initial 1 lakh units is basically 14,000. Okay. So in our long run, our supply increased by 14,000 units. So the question was asking, what is the increase in the quantity supplied of good X between the short run and the long run? So in our short run, we had an increase of 8,000 units, while in our long run, we had an increase of 14,000. Okay. So if we find out the difference, that will give us 6,000 units. Hence the answer is A. So it was a bit tricky question, but you just need to apply simple math, and inshallah it will be easy. Question number 8. Question number 8 states, the diagram shows the European market for diesel fuel and the original equilibrium is at M. So we are at M currently, here we are, and we are at M, and we have a price of G, and the quantity supplied is T. Okay, so this is our price, this is our quantity, and this is our equilibrium. Europeans want low emission cars. Okay, so Europeans want low emission cars. This statement, this basically means that our aggregate demand or our demand curve basically, it will shift to the left because our demand will fall, and therefore the demand for diesel fuel has decreased from D1 to D2. As I said, we shift from the left from D1 to D2. Okay, so now the new equilibrium, I will denote it with the light blue color, is now at N. Okay, so we shifted from M to N. Which area represents the new producer surplus for companies using diesel fuel? As I told you before, let me draw it again, just for your own sake. Here's our graph, our supply curve, our demand curve. This is our equilibrium, and this is our price level, while this is our quantity supplied level or quantity demanded level. So the area above the price and the supply curve, but below the demand curve, this entire region, this is our consumer surplus, while the area below the demand and price curve, but above the supply curve, this entire region, this is basically our producer surplus. Okay. So now in this diagram, we have to find out the producer surplus for companies supplying diesel fuel. So first of all, right now we should know that we moved from N to N. So now our price level is basically at H and the quantity supplied is basically at R. So the new area will be, I'll just denote it with a green color. Okay. So as you said, that above the supply curve, but below the price and demand curve. So now that our demand curve is this one, is basically this one, while our supply line is basically this one. Hence, our producer surplus will be this triangle right here. This one will be our producer surplus. So it can be denoted by H, N, and G. So J, H, and C is the correct answer. So once you know how it works, basically, it's quite easy to figure out from any type of questions. Question number 9. In which situation is the demand for a product said to be price elastic? Okay. So A says it's no, A is incorrect. And it states the quantity demanded responds to a change in price. This is a general principle, not a specific, not specific to price elasticity. B states an increase in price brings about a decrease in the quantity demanded. This too is incorrect, as we are talking about the law of demand, which is applicable to all goods, elastic goods as well, and inelastic goods as well. Option C states an increase in price induces consumers to spend more on the product. This too is talking about our demand curve. So basically, this is correct. This is incorrect, as it's typical for inelastic demand, not for elastic demand. A decrease in price brings about an increase in revenue. So this is correct, as we are talking about whenever price decrease leads whenever price decrease, it leads to an increase in our total revenue. Hence, D is correct. Question number 10 states golf club membership fees in Singapore have risen as a result of restriction on travel to cheaper golf courses in neighborhood countries. Okay, so if we divide this question into two halves, so this first question, so this first part basically this states that our based on the information that is given by the examiner, we can infer that the restriction on travel and closure of some local courses, as stated after this part, would decrease the supply of golf club membership. Hence, our aggregate supply will fall. The second effect that we will have after this number of changes, it is that the factors that might affect demand for membership, they might increase, as now they are the only available options for golf enthusiasts in Singapore. So our aggregate demand, this too will increase. So let's apply these both changes in our graph. Our supply shifted from S1 to S2. So we were first at X, then we moved on to A, and then our demand increased. So it shifted right from D1 to D2. So then we moved on from A to B. So the answer is B. It was quite simple. Moving on to the next question. The diagram below shows the demand and supply curves for solar energy in India. The initial equilibrium is at point X, and the Indian government increases the subsidy to solar energy producers. So our subsidy increased, hence our cost decreased, and hence our price decreased as well. At the same time, there's a rise in the price of alternative sources of energy. Okay, so this will further increase the demand for solar energy. Okay, my bad, our battery is down. Anyways, what is the new equilibrium position? First of all, we were at X with a decrease. So with a decrease in cost and a decrease in our products, our supply would shift to the right from S1 to S2. Hence, we move on to at this point, and then our demand increased as well because our substitute products, their prices increased. So we'll move on from D1 to D2, and we'll reach at B. So the answer is B. Question number 12. A specific tax is placed on the sale of bottles of lemonade. In the diagram, S is the supply curve before the imposition of the tax. So this supply curve is before the imposition of the tax, and this ST tax, this one is after the tax. Okay. So which distance represents the specific tax on each bottle? First of all, we have to find out our price level. So first of all, we were at X as our supply and demand met at X, and then our supply shifted to the left as our prices increased. So first of all, we were at here, price 1, and then our prices increased to price 2. So now basically the price is here. Okay. So whenever we are talking about tax, tax is basically, if it is an indirect tax that is mostly imposed on our producers and manufacturers, then half of the tax burden is shared onto the consumers, while half is shared on the producers. So if I just change colors and I show you. So basically, this half is the tax burden that is shared by consumers, while this half is basically the tax burden shared by our producers. So whenever you want to find out distance or the area that represents a specific tax on something, you just need to remember where the where the initial price was P1 and then where it increased to P2. So this entire tax would be your consumer tax, while the tax on producers will can be identified by the area above the supply curve but below our price line. Okay, so often in our exam it will be shown by this line. Okay, so if we ask about for total tax, this entire section is basically total tax. Hence the answer will be WT. Question number 13. Okay. Question number 13 basically states demand for medical face masks exceeds supply during a disease outbreak such as COVID. Okay. What is the most likely cause of this excess demand? Whenever we are talking about excess demand, it can be shown by on the graph like this. For example, we are here at an equilibrium of E. Excess demand means when the demand is somewhere here, okay, when the demand is here, while at this point, suppliers only want to supply this quantity 1, while the consumers, they want quantity 2. So this will lead to a shortage. Okay. So they're asking what is the most likely cause of this excess demand. Some consumers do not have effective demand. No, we are not talking about effective demand. Effective demand basically refers to when a consumer is willing to buy and able to buy. I mean, he has the money and he has the desire, both. Hence, A is wrong, as you're not talking about effective demand. B states the demand for medical face mask is priced inelastic in the short run. We cannot find out whether it's inelastic or it is elastic. Hence, that too is wrong. C says the price of medical face mask is fixed below the equilibrium price. Exactly. One reason why there would be an excess demand is because the government may have imposed a maximum price here somewhere here. Yeah, P1. This will cause the supply to be at Q1. Why? Because the producers, they want to supply at like probably Q2 and to earn more revenue from P2. However, due to an imposition of maximum price, they cannot do so. Hence, they are forced to supply at Q1. This leads to a shortage. This shortage or an excess demand. So C is correct. D states the supply of medical face masks is inelastic in the short run. Now that too, as the option B, we cannot infer from the data that we are given. So this is wrong. Moving on to question number 14. The diagram shows the demand and supply curve for a good. Okay, so currently we are here at PQ. The government fixes a maximum price of OP1. Okay, so this is the maximum price fixed by the government. Remember, whenever we have to fix an effective maximum price, it must be below the equilibrium price in order to keep our prices down. If you put it above the equilibrium, this will just lead to no change, as the producer, they are not such a fool to increase their prices and to decrease their revenue by having less demand of their product. And whenever you want to impose a minimum price, you must impose it above the equilibrium in order to increase our quantity supplied and our prices. So in this case, this is for our minimum and this is for our maximum. So in this case, if we impose a minimum price above the equilibrium price, this will lead to the suppliers to increase their production to, for example, point B, and to earn more from price 2, for example. Okay. So in this case, in this question number 14 case, this one is totally an ineffective policy, as the government has imposed a maximum price above the equilibrium price. What could happen? Okay, so consumer would have to be rationed to quantity 0Q now. They will not have to be rationed. We cannot infer that from the data that we have been given. Option B states the government would have to introduce a subsidy of PP1. Let's talk about this subsidy now, because the producer, they're not even willing to increase their supply. C states the market equilibrium quantity 0Q would be demanded and supplied. Exactly. So the market equilibrium quantity, this will be demanded and it will be supplied as well. Hence, maximum price will not have any effect on the equilibrium price. So C is the correct answer. The supply of quantity of quantity OQ2 would be guaranteed. Now this is totally something else. This would be in the case of minimum price. So this. Okay, so moving on to question number 15. It states which statement correctly describes absolute advantage. Okay, it is when a country has a. Okay, first of all, we have to define what is absolute advantage. Basically, absolute advantage is when a country, for example, there's a country A, it can produce more output than any other country with a specific set of resources. For example, it has 3 resources. Okay, the entire world or country A, they all have these 3 specific resources. Okay, however, country A can produce actually, for example, it can produce 8 more resources from these 3 resources, while the world can only produce, for example, only 4. Okay. Hence, country A has an absolute advantage in whatever this product is. While comparative advantage is basically it is between two products. Okay. For example, there's shoe and there's jackets. Okay. So country X may produce more shoes than country Y, as it has a comparative advantage in it, and it may use all of its resources in producing only and only shoes, while it will import jackets because that's the more sensible thing. However, in real life, it is hard to actually determine who has what comparative advantage in which thing. So moving on to the options, option A states it is when a country has a higher opportunity cost in producing a good than another country. Now this is basically talking about opportunity cost. Hence this is wrong. Option B states it is when a country has a lower wage cost. That too is wrong, as it is talking about lower wages. Option C states it is when the relative prices of exports. Now, as it started talking about prices of export, I immediately knew that this was not the answer. As see, prices of exports and prices of imports, these are mentioned when we are talking about trade of terms of trade. Okay, taught. Hence C is wrong. D states it is when a country's output of a good is greater per unit of resource than any other country, as shown in this diagram. So this is correct. Moving on to question number 15. The table, question number 16. The table shows the income and wealth of Yasmin. First of all, you have to define from all these items which one is income and which one is wealth. So I will use a light blue for income and green for wealth. Children welfare benefit. Okay, so this is basically your income. Because welfare benefits, these are not accumulated, these are only received and then they are spent. However, wealth is basically accumulated over time. Okay, so dividends from share, this too is an income as it is a simple income source. Property owned, this one is our wealth. Savings in bank, this too is our wealth. Shares, this one is our income, while wages, this too is our income. Sorry, shares, this one is our shares are basically our wealth, as we have as when we buy shares, we keep them for a long period of time. Okay, and then we can sell them, and we when we buy them, we have a specific value that is constant over the entire time. Okay, and we don't spend it, basically we earn from it. Hence shares are wages. So the question is asking what is the value of Yasmin's wealth. Okay, so first of all we'll identify these three wealths. Okay, and the quantity they have and the value they have. Sorry, 40,000 plus 1,000 plus 2,000, this will give us 43,000. Hence our answer will be option B. Question number 17 states which group is most likely to suffer during high inflation. So we have two types of inflation. One is our cost push inflation when our cost rises, which leads to an increase in price, which leads to an increase in a decrease in aggregate demand. While demand pull inflation, when our aggregate demand basically rises, this leads to increase in prices, and which leads to increase in aggregate supply. So borrowers now, they will actually benefit from high inflation, as the real value of money will decrease. Hence they will have to pay less money than before. Importers now, as they too will benefit from high inflation, as the domestic demand as the domestic prices will basically rise in both type of inflations, and hence people might shift to imported goods. Sorry. Producers, they too may not suffer from high inflation, except if the inflation's cause is basically cost push. Okay, so if it is cost push, then this may lead to lower total revenue for our producers. However, it has not specified which type of inflation is this, hence we cannot determine whether they will suffer or they will benefit. Option D states fixed wage earners. This is correct, as fixed wages earner, they will suffer in both cases. As in cost push, there will be an increase in price, which will lead to lower disposable income, okay, while in aggregate demand pull inflation, this will lead to rise in price as well, which will further decrease their disposable income. Question number 18 states which statement explains why the aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. So if you look at our graphs, our aggregate demand curve is always downward sloping, while our supply curve is basically upward sloping. A states as prices fall, the demand for exports becomes more elastic. Okay, so I have to first of all mention a few points. So basically, whenever we are talking about our demand curve or our supply curve, we need to know two things. In our demand curve, this origin point. So basically, this one is our mid. Sorry, I'll just make a random one here. So this one is our midpoint. Okay. So the upper portion of our demand curve, or the top portion of our demand curve, this one here, our demand is basically elastic, while in this middle point our demand is unit elastic, and in this lower or the bottom portion of our demand curve, our demand is inelastic. So once that in mind, we'll try to solve this question. As prices fall, demand for exports becomes more elastic. Now, as prices, for example, the price was here P1, as it fell from P1 to P2, the demand will basically move from the elastic area to inelastic area. Hence, that is correct. This is correct. B states, as prices fall, fewer goods are imported. That depends on external factors. As prices fall, the rate of interest will rise. That too depends on external factors. D states, as prices fall, real wealth rises, and so spending increases. Exactly. When prices fall, consumers' disposable income, or the real wealth, will basically rise from all this portion that I'm coloring in green. This is their gain in their real wealth. Hence, they will spend more. Thus, their spending will increase. So the answer is D. Moving on to the next question, question number 90. The diagram shows the aggregate demand and aggregate supply for an economy. Okay, so if you look at the diagram, our aggregate supply shifted from AS1 to AS2. Whenever our aggregate supply or aggregate demand curve shifts left, okay, so this is bad. However, when our aggregate demand or our aggregate supply curve shift right, this is basically good. Okay, so which changes in subsidies and indirect taxes would have caused that change from AS1 to AS2. Okay, one thing that you should know, that the direct taxes that the government imposes on consumers directly, they are basically progressive, while the indirect taxes that are imposed on manufacturers and producers, they are basically regressive. By progressive, I mean, so if on a scale or if on a level, on different income levels, for example, there's a high income and here's a low income. Sorry, this is low income. The tax that is imposed on our higher income for our higher income groups, okay, these progressive tax, they might charge, for example, 50% of their income. I know it's too much higher. It was in UK, and I think so. It still is. While for our lower income group, progressive tax or direct taxes, they may charge something of 10%. However, our indirect taxes that are regressive, they tend to be unfair. So, for example, we have this high income group and we have this low income group. Okay, so they will charge the same amount, for example, 5% for both of them. And for example, if you have a salary of $2,000 per month, okay, so 5% for you is much insignificant part of your income compared to a guy who is only earning $100 per month. Okay, hence that's why these indirect taxes, they promote, or they don't help in equally distributing income, while direct taxes or progressive taxes, they do. So the question is asking which changes in subsidies and indirect taxes would have caused the change from AS to AS1 to AS2. So basically our aggregate supply has shifted to the left, which means our aggregate supply has decreased. A states higher subsidies and higher indirect taxes. Okay, so if we divide this question into two parts, higher subsidies means our AS would rise, okay, our aggregate supply would rise, while higher indirect taxes, this means that our aggregate supply will fall. However, in our diagram, our aggregate supply has basically shifted to the left. It is not, it did not rise. So A is wrong. B states higher subsidies, that too is wrong, as it's talking about higher subsidies. While C states lower subsidies, which is correct, as it will result in our aggregate supply to shift to the left, to decrease, and higher indirect taxes. This will further cause our aggregate supply to shift to the left, basically decrease. Hence C is the answer. D states lower subsidies and lower indirect taxes. Lower subsidies will cause our aggregate supply to decrease. However, lower indirect taxes may cause our aggregate supply to basically increase. Question number 20 states the graph gives the percentage unemployed for all people aged 16 and over, and for young people aged 16 to 24. So if you see from the graph, we have an initial fall in our unemployment, and then there's another fall that reaches till 2018, and then we see a rise after 2018 till 2020. So what is the consequence for consumer expenditure on products consumed by the 16 to 24 age group over the period 2010 till 2020? So whenever our unemployment rises, basically our consumption, I will denote it with a C, that decreases. They both are inversely proportional. Okay. So basically, when our unemployment rise, our income falls, which leads to lower consumption. However, when our unemployment falls, it leads to higher incomes or more incomes, which leads to an increase in our consumption. So if we look at the graph, basically we have a falling. I'll just try to highlight it. Basically, we have a falling unemployment rate. Okay, it falls from 2010 till 2018, and then after 2018, it starts to rise. Okay, so in this section of the graph, our consumption must have increased as our unemployment fell. However, after 2018, our consumption may have decreased as our unemployment rose again. So option A is wrong, as the fall in consumer expenditure across the whole period. Across the whole period, we don't have a fall. First, we have a rise, and then we have a fall. B states an initial fall in consumer expenditure followed by a rise. Actually, it's the opposite. C states an initial rise in consumer expenditure followed by a fall. Exactly. First, we saw a rise in our consumer expenditure as our unemployment levels fell, and then after 2018, we saw a decrease in our consumer expenditure as our unemployment levels increased. So the answer is C. Question number 21 states in the diagram the intersection of AD and long run aggregate supply curve at point X represents the current macroeconomic equilibrium. So we are here. We currently are at X. Okay, which point could represent the new equilibrium after the introduction of an increase in the retirement age? An increase in the retirement age will lead to an increase in our aggregate supply. Okay, which will lead to an increase in the income, which will lead to an increase in the consumption, which basically leads to an increase in our aggregate demand. Okay, so by only by looking at this one policy, we can deduce that our aggregate supply will basically increase and our aggregate demand, that too will increase. Okay, so let's apply these both changes in our graph. So first of all, we are at X. So after an increase in our aggregate supply, we will shift from LARS to LARS1. Okay, so from X we will shift to here, and then as our aggregate demand will increase from AD to AD1, from AD to basically AD1, so we'll basically reach at C point, at point C. So the answer is C. Question 22, basically this one has some issue, hence it has been removed from the question paper as stated in the marking scheme. Question number 23, it said the diagram shows PPC curve for two countries, India and Japan. Okay, which combination of output would be achieved if each country specialized in the product in which it has a comparative advantage? Okay, so Japan has a comparative advantage. I will just denote it with blue. So Japan has a comparative advantage in rice. So just right here, Japan, it can produce 500 rice and 200 tea with its current resources. However, India can produce 600 rice and 200 tea with its current resources. Okay, so of course India should produce more rice, as it can produce 600, while Japan can only produce 500 with its current resources. So if India specialized in rice and Japan specialized in tea, we will have total values. We will have 600 rice and we will have 200 tea. Okay, hence the answer A is correct. Moving on to the next question. A country's currency has depreciated against all the currencies in its main trading partner. A depreciate in the currency of a country means its exports will basically become more cheaper. Okay, while its imports will become stands for imports will become more expensive. This will lead to an increase in our aggregate demand. Okay, so the option says the terms of trade will improve. Whenever we are talking about our terms of trade, as I told you before, whenever we are talking about our terms of trade, we just refer to the prices of exports and imports. We don't talk about the value or the quantity or the quality or revenue, whatever. We only talk about prices whenever we are talking about terms of trade. So basically, it will not improve the term of trade, as in when we are talking about prices, lower prices are basically bad. In reality, I know lower prices are good, as it will further promote demand and consumption. However, when we are talking about terms of trade, in the context of terms of trade, lower prices are basically bad, while higher prices for imports, that as well is bad. Hence, it will not improve, it will basically worsen. So the answer is C. 25. A country with a floating exchange rate experiences a large surplus on the current account of its balance of payment. So whenever we are talking about balance of payment, BOP, it contains three components. It's made up of three components: current account, then we have our financial account, and then lastly we have our capital account, So basically, current account measures the income of a nation. It includes the trade balance, exports and imports of all goods and services, net income on investments and direct payments. While our financial account, this one basically records the change in international ownership of assets. It shows how much of the national assets foreigners own and how much of the foreign assets the resident of a specific country own. While our capital account, this one basically includes any other financial transaction that doesn't affect the nation's economic output or growth, like transfer payments, for example, aid, donation, and so on. So their asking amount is likely to decrease as a consequence. Okay, so it's the exports of capital from the country. Whenever you have a surplus on your current account, this means that your demand must have been high that may have caused this surplus. Okay, I'll just delete this all. So option A is wrong, as the exports of the capital from the country, they will not decrease. Basically, they will increase as after an increase in your aggregate demand, your aggregate supply basically that too increases, thus causing an increase in the prices. B states the level of employment in the country that too will not decrease as an increase in our aggregate supply will basically lead to an increase in our aggregate supply of labor. Hence, B is incorrect. C states the prices of imports into the country. Exactly, because whenever we have a large surplus on our current account, it means that our aggregate demand basically is high, which means that our prices will basically rise for our exports, or our exports price will rise, while our imports prices will fall. Hence, the price of import into the country will basically decrease. C is the answer. D is incorrect. 26 question number 26 states which measure is aimed directly at promoting international trade. Often students, they make a mistake here when they try to choose the best option. They forget that the question or the examiner, he's asking you about a measure that is promoting international trade, not allowing international trade. There's a difference between promoting and allowing. For example, I allow you to eat candy. However, in the second scenario, I promote candy to you. Okay, so there's a difference between allowing and there's a difference between promoting. Allowing and promoting. So option A states decreasing existing quotas. So when you decrease existing quotas, you're not basically you're not promoting. You are basically allowing importers to whether they would like to increase their imports or not. Okay, hence A is incorrect. Option B states increasing interest rates. That too is a form of allowing something, not promoting. This is basically a form of allowing. So this is wrong. Option C states subsidies paid to export industry. Exactly, subsidies are basically they help. Sorry, what the hell happened? So subsidies basically promote exporters or manufacturers. Exporters to export more. And if you look at option C, they have mentioned to export industries. Hence, this measure is basically aimed directly at promoting international trade. C is the correct answer. Question number 27 says, what would be classified as a supply side policy measure? A law to reduce the power of trade union. Exactly. Whenever we are talking about trade unions and workers and laborers or employees, it means supply side policy. Okay. So it basically refers to the supply side aspects of a policy. B states a reduction in the government fiscal deficit. This refers to our fiscal policies. However, C states an open market sale of securities. This is our basically monetary policy, or in some cases it may be our fiscal policy. And the imposition of a tariff on imported goods, this too is our fiscal policy, as we are talking about taxes on our imports. Question number 8 states, what is the equivalent of a country's national debt? The answer is C. No, sorry, the answer is basically B. Why? Because the accumulated borrowing, the answer is A, my bad. So question number 28, what is the equivalent of a country's national debt? The answer is A, as it is the accumulated borrowing of the country, of the government. So a government basically borrows from its own banks and it borrows from other countries' banks. Okay, so all this borrowing, it's called national debt. Moving on, so option B is wrong because the difference between government spending and taxation, that is not our national debt. While this, so option B's answer may be a deficit or a surplus. While option C states the interest paid by the government on all the money it owes. Now that too is wrong. Option D states the total money owed by all households in the country. Now this one will be private debt, which will not affect any country's national debt. For example, if I took a loan of $500 from a bank, it will not affect the national debt of a country. Question 29 states a country experiences a fall in the value of exports. Now they're talking about value, not the price, and an increase in the value of imports of goods and services. What are the effects of these changes? So our value of exports basically fell, while our value of imports basically rose. This will lead to a fall in our aggregate demand, and the balance of payment will basically improve as value. Whenever the value of our exports will fall, this means that our prices will basically rise, while the prices of our imports will basically fall. This condition, when you're talking about balance of payment and terms of trade, this is basically a good sign. Question number 30 states a government orders its central bank to buy its domestic currency on the foreign exchange market in the belief that this will improve the balance of payment. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. Question 30 is basically removed from the question paper as it had some issues. So this is for today. Inshallah, tomorrow we will attempt our question paper 12 from May-June 2023. So do like the video, do subscribe, and do share it with other students as it may help them in their upcoming exams. Assalamu alaikum.